Good evening and welcome to the 2024 Maryland Senate debate from the Irene and Edward H. Kaplan production studio at Maryland Public Television in Owings Mills, Maryland. We're excited to bring you tonight's debate, presented by NBC News, NBC Washington, WBAL-TV 11, and Maryland Public Television. And good evening, I'm Chuck Todd, NBC's chief political analyst and moderator for tonight's debate between the Democratic candidate, Angela Alsobrooks, and the Republican candidate, Larry Hogan. Let's begin by quickly covering the rules for today's event. The debate will last 1 hour, and it will begin with 90-second opening statements from each candidate. Then our panelists and myself will pose questions directly to the candidates. NBC News and our team of panelists generated the questions. The candidates have not seen them in advance. Each candidate will have 1 minute to respond, and the candidate answering the first will get an additional 30-second rebuttal. As moderator, I do reserve the right to follow up as needed. And finally, we will conclude with 1 minute closing statements from each candidate. There is a timekeeper who will notify candidates of their remaining time and when time is expired. In the interest of trying to cover as much ground as possible, we ask the candidates to adhere to these time limits. So now, let's welcome our panelists, all of whom have covered Maryland politics for decades. Tracy Wilkins is an investigative reporter with the News 4 I-Team in Washington, D.C. Deborah Weiner is an anchor at WBAL-TV 11 in Baltimore. And Jeff Sulkin is an anchor right here at Maryland Public Television. And now, of course, the candidates. Republican and former governor of Maryland, Larry Hogan, and Democrat and the current Prince George's County executive, Angela Alsobrooks. And with that, we begin with the debate. County Executive Alsobrooks has the first opening statement.
Well, thank you. Good evening. First of all, I'd like to thank our host for having us tonight. I want to thank former Governor Hogan for being here as well, and for everyone for tuning in. I'm Angela Alsobrooks. I'm the proud Democratic nominee for United States Senate. Like many Marylanders, I'm also a member of the sandwich generation. I'm the proud mother of a 19-year-old daughter and the proud daughter of a retired receptionist and a newspaper deliveryman. I grew up in Maryland, and I spent my entire adult life in public service, beginning my career as a domestic violence prosecutor, where I stood up for our families and held violent offenders accountable. As the elected prosecutor, I also lowered violent crime by 50%. As county executive, I've been one of the top job creators in the state of Maryland. We've built 10 new schools, and we're breaking ground on an additional 8. In the United States Senate, I will stand up for our values, creating economic opportunity for every Maryland family. I'll also fight for our freedoms, like a woman's right to choose, contraception, and IVF. I'll also fight to make sure that we are ending gun violence in America. I will work also to hand a majority to my friend and mentor, President Kamala Harris, to ensure that she will be successful and effective as President of the United States. Thank you so much, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much. Governor Hogan, your opening statement.
Well, thank you, Chuck, and I want to thank Maryland Public Television, NBC, and its affiliates in Washington and Baltimore. It's a real pleasure to be here. I want to thank all of you for tuning in tonight. And I just want to start by saying that I like and respect Angela Alsobrooks. We got a chance to work together while I was governor. We accomplished a great deal together for Prince George's County, and she's got a great life story. I just happen to believe that right now, the reason I'm stepping up to run is not to run against her or to try to defeat her. The reason I decided to run for Senate was, the reason I ran for governor because I was frustrated with all the taxes and the unaffordability. I decided to step up to run for Senate. It was because I had never been more concerned about the direction of our country. What we see today is nothing but divisiveness and dysfunction in Washington, where nothing ever seems to get done. Our country is being torn apart by the extreme voices on both sides. We're not going to solve any of the terrible problems facing the country with more partisanship and one more party line vote, or just continuing to do the same thing that we've always done. The only way we're going to make a difference if we can find strong, independent leaders who are willing to stand up to both parties and try to bring about common sense bipartisan solutions, which is exactly what I delivered for 8 years as governor.
All right, let's get the debate started. I want to start with your both of your political identities. Ms. Alsobrooks, you and your party have been campaigning against Governor Hogan by singling out his party affiliation, almost solely, more so than anything else. Is his major disqualification for this office simply that he's a member of the Republican Party?
Well, first of all, I have to tell you that the stakes of this election could not be any higher. We are facing an election where the future of our country and our freedoms are at stake. What we recognize is in this election, a woman's right to choose is on the ballot. What we know is that the former governor is a person who vetoed important abortion care legislation and also vetoed important legislation that would have created a simple ban on ghost guns and would have also disallowed long guns. It created a waiting period. The Republican Party has declared war on women's reproductive freedoms. We recognize that this party of chaos and division that is led by Donald Trump is one that cannot lead our country and also has severe consequences for Marylanders. Unfortunately, former Governor Hogan accepted an invitation by Mitch McConnell to run in this race because they want to give Republicans a majority in the Senate. Doing so will control Supreme Court justice nominations, will also control cabinet appointments for President Kamala Harris, and I do not believe that having a majority controlled by Republicans is in the best interest of our state or our country.
Mr. Hogan, you have 1 minute.
Well, we're going to hear an awful lot about this kind of talk all night. That's the way they talk in Washington. I can tell you that just trying to focus on nothing but party is not what I'm going to do. You're going to hear nothing but red versus blue. I care a lot more about the red, white, and blue. I've been the leading voice in my party standing up to some of the things you're talking about. And everything you just said, your entire campaign is based on, multiple things that are completely not true. I will support and will sponsor codifying Roe. I've said that from the beginning. When I was governor, when I ran for governor, I promised to support women's access to abortion, and I delivered on that promise for 8 years. The bill you're referring to was about protecting women because it was rolling back and making it less safe for women to get access to abortion. It was allowing non-medical professionals. And for you to lie about something as important as this issue, it really is insulting.
You have 30 seconds to respond to that.
Well, first of all, I have worked across the aisle. In fact, I worked with the former governor, getting $400 million to invest in Prince George's County, causing the former governor to call me the best county executive he had ever known. Said his father was a county executive and I was the best he'd ever known. The thing we do know is that it is an unrefuted fact that the former governor vetoed abortion care legislation and then refused to release the funding to train abortion care providers and said that Donald Trump deserved credit for his incredible Supreme Court justices after they overturned Roe. It's just an unrefuted fact.
Mr. Hogan, I want to follow up with something. I'm going to use my discretion here. You have a lot of TV ads that talk about your independence, and you say you're going to be a political independent. These TV ads are paid for by the NRSC, by the Republican Party. Can voters really believe you'll be an independent if the Republicans are paying for your TV advertising?
Well, I think the voters of Maryland know me, and they know my proven track record of standing up to Donald Trump, to Mitch McConnell, and to the Republican Party. I've probably stood up more than anyone in America. I mean, you know, I've been on your show multiple times. I'm one of the harshest critics. The people know that I was a bipartisan governor who got things done by working with a 70% Democratic legislature, and we accomplished a heck of a lot by reaching across the aisle. I'm not a MAGA, Donald Trump, Mitch McConnell person, as my opponent would let you believe.
Ms. Alsobrooks, I'll give you 30 seconds. Is there anything in the current Democratic agenda that you'll fight against?
In the Democratic agenda, I support the Democratic agenda to codify in federal law women's right to choose. I support banning assault weapons. I support middle class tax cuts. So I support the Democratic agenda. But let me just say this: I stood up to my party. When President Biden looked like he was waffling on the FBI, I marched right in there and fought against him, Tim Kaine, and Mark Warner to get the FBI headquarters located in Maryland, and I won.
Thank you. Deborah has the next question.
Mr. Hogan, along these lines of your criticism of former President Trump, given Mr. Trump's vow to seek retribution if he wins, could your relationship with him end up hurting Maryland?
Look, I think what we need desperately in Washington are people that are willing, that have the courage to put country over party and to put people over politics and to stand up to the leaders of their party. I don't think there's anyone in America who has done that more than me. And I've never been afraid, and I never will be. And I've never backed down. I'm one of the only ones in my party who can say that. And look, I just don't think we're going to fix anything by talking about how we're going to jam things through. Everything has to be Republican or Democrat. Just down the road from Washington, was able to get a lot done by doing just the opposite. We set an example for exactly what needs to happen in Washington by working together, and I was happy to work with County Executive Alsobrooks. We worked for 8 years to get the FBI, and after she became county executive, we continued to work together. I built a cancer center, hospital in Prince George as part of my Cancer Moonshot initiative. We funded the Blue Line Corridor. We have worked together well. I work with people on both sides of the aisle. That's one of the things I'm known for.
You have 1 minute to respond.
You know, and former governor's right. We worked together very well. Built a new cancer center, made record investments in Prince George's County. But the fact of the matter is, if he wanted to be an independent, he should have run as one. He did not opt to run as an independent. He opted to accept Mitch McConnell's request to come in. Mitch McConnell bragged about his ability to recruit the former governor because he believed that he would give a majority in the Senate to Republicans, which has huge consequences. The fact is, I believe the governor when he says that he would like to vote with Roe. But you know what? The fact is, if the Republicans have a majority in the Senate, there will be no vote on Roe. We've seen this all before with these Republicans who refused to allow Barack Obama his vote on Merrick Garland. We understand that they also will hand over the gun laws to the NRA. What we know is that no matter what former Governor Hogan says today, he would empower a caucus of people who will take our country backwards, putting Lindsey Graham over the Judiciary Committee, putting Ted Cruz over the Science Committee, who's a science and climate denier. It is that he would empower a caucus that is against our values.
Mr. Hogan?
I think sometimes one voice standing up really can make a difference. And I don't think we need more partisan politicians who are going to be rubber stamps for their party. What we need are people that are willing to stand up and work with both parties or to criticize both parties when they're wrong. I was governor through 3 presidents. I worked with President Obama and Trump and Biden. And we were able, when I disagreed, I strongly stood up and said I disagreed. And I've stood up to my party. I'll stand up to either party. I think we need mavericks in Washington that aren't going to just do exactly what the party bosses tell them to do.
Thank you. Tracy has the next question.
Yes, Ms. Alsobrooks, Mr. Hogan and his allies have attacked you for claiming tax credits you were ineligible to receive, including one meant for seniors. And your opponents argue that those tax credits you claimed make you untrustworthy for Maryland voters. What is your response?
You know, first of all, thank you so much for asking the question and giving me a chance to clear it up. I have always paid my taxes, always. And I also stood up for my grandmother. When she needed to leave her house, I took over her mortgage. I paid her mortgage until I sold the house about 6 years ago and never knew that she had a senior tax credit because I never applied for one. When I learned about it, I reached out to the DC government and I have paid back the amount of that tax credit and I'm working to pay off the interest. But I thank you so much for asking that question.
Mr. Hogan, your response, why should this matter to voters?
Well, I'm not sure it should matter. I think that the county executive Alsobrooks has said that she didn't apply for the tax credit. She said that she paid off a grandmother's mortgage, and but she also took out her own mortgages and swore and attested on those documents that it was going to be her primary residence, which it wasn't. And she did get a tax break that was meant for low-income seniors, and she's not a low-income senior, and it was a rental property. It was not her personal residence. So I don't know that people should make a decision based on that. I just think she ought to have the opportunity to explain herself.
Ms. Alsobrooks, just to clarify, I'll give you 30 seconds. Is it all paid back? You said you're working to pay back.
I paid back the amount of the tax credit when I was notified that I got a tax credit. Again, I never applied for the tax credit, was never even notified that I had the tax credit. But when I learned about it, I paid back the amount of the tax credit, and I'm working to pay off the interest.
Jeff has the next question.
UMBC released a poll this week, found that 89% of Marylanders are concerned about inflation. 3-part question on this, past, present, future. Who gets the blame for the wave of inflation that we had? Who gets the credit for bringing down the rate of inflation? And how do we prevent this from ever happening again?
Mr. Hogan, you go first.
Yeah, with affordability, inflation is a huge problem. And as I'm out on the campaign trail talking to people every single day, it's the #1 issue that I hear about. The cost of groceries, the cost of housing. You know, a single mom trying to put groceries on the table, a young person, young couple trying to buy their first home has been priced out of reach. Inflation is out of control, and there's plenty of blame to go around. This is one that Republicans and Democrats can both take blame for because they both ran up the debt and continue to cause these kinds of problems. And I'm not sure, while you say it's come down, the average person doesn't feel like it has. It's what I ran for governor on. I was so frustrated that things weren't affordable, and my focus was on making life more affordable. So I cut taxes 8 years in a row by $4.7 billion for hardworking Marylanders, for low-income Marylanders with the Earned Income Tax Credit, for small businesses, and for retirees. We fought for 8 years to eliminate retirement taxes, and we finally passed that in my last year. My opponent wants to raise taxes on Social Security, which is not going to make things more affordable.
Ms. Alsobrooks, you have a minute?
Well, you know, first of all, let me just say, I also have heard from so many Marylanders the concern that I share. You know, as the daughter of a receptionist and a car salesman, I understand how the cost of groceries that have gone up 25% since the pandemic affect everyday families. And what we understand is that huge corporations who are receiving record profits right now are doing so and paying fewer taxes than average hardworking citizens. I attribute that to the rising cost, and we also know that there's a lack of competition. We're going to have to make sure that we are holding big corporations accountable, causing them to pay their fair share of taxes. I'll cut taxes for the middle class, and by the way, I don't propose raising taxes on anyone who earns under $400,000. The truth of the matter is we're going to have to save Social Security. For people like my aging parents, Social Security is a lifeline. By 2035, it's due to run out of money, and raising the cap for those who are earning over $400,000 to save Social Security is going to be really important.
30 seconds, Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a long track record of this being my primary focus. It's really why I ran for governor. It's what I focused on for 8 years, and I think we had more success than anyone in America. We took a terrible economy that was the 49th out of 50 states, and we had a $5.1 billion deficit and turned it into a surplus, and we made life more affordable for average hardworking folks by cutting tolls, by cutting 350 fees, and by cutting taxes 8 years in a row on the poorest of the Marylanders and retirees.
Deborah has the next question for Ms. Alsobrooks.
Ms. Alsobrooks, you are running for the seat long held by Senator Ben Cardin, a staunch supporter of Israel, who presided over Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to a joint session of Congress. Senator Chris Van Hollen, on the other hand, refused to attend the speech and joined 7 other senators in asking President Biden to, quote, use all levers to pressure Israel over Gaza. When it comes to Israel and the now 1-year-old war, are you a Cardin Democrat or a Van Hollen Democrat?
I'm neither. I'm Angela Alsobrooks, and I will represent myself in the Senate. I've been really fortunate to have the support of both Senator Van Hollen and Senator Cardin. And we have a tremendous delegation who I've worked with over the years. When it comes to this issue, I will be Angela Alsobrooks as a senator, and let me tell you what I believe. We recognize the horrific attack that occurred in Israel on October 7th, and I believe in this moment we have an obligation to make sure that we're getting those hostages home to their families and that we get to a ceasefire, making sure as well that we get aid into Gaza for the Palestinians who are suffering, and we've got to get to a 2-state solution so that we have peace and security in Israel, peace, security, and self-determination for the Palestinians in Gaza. Going long term, it's going to be really important that our multilateral relationships with UAE, Saudi Arabia, Jordan is going to be necessary for us to isolate Iran, to have the long-term sort of stability that we need. But I support Israel and support its right to defend itself, and I will continue to support that alliance.
Mr. Hogan, you have 1 minute. How would
well,
you?
I'm going to be a strong supporter of Israel, as I always have been, and I'm going to be more like a champion for Israel, like Ben Cardin, rather than trying to equivocate or do both sidisms or to follow Chris Van Hollen, who is probably the most anti-Israel member of the United States Senate. And, you know, I disagree with my opponent, who was calling for cutting off military aid to Israel and demanding an immediate ceasefire. The horrific, just this week, we celebrated the tremendous loss of life, the largest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust. And we remembered those victims and their families and those hostages that are still being held. And at moments like this, people have to stand up and be counted. And we, as a country, have to stand with our allies. And Israel's our most important ally. And we've got to stand up to our enemies. And I don't think you can try to walk down the middle on this issue. I think there's no question we've got to back Israel.
Ms. Alsobrooks, just to follow up, would you have attended the speech if you were senator with Prime Minister Netanyahu? And do you believe he is an obstacle to peace, or is he an ally for peace?
I would have attended the speech, and let me, if I can just give a quick second. First of all, I do support the U.S.-Israeli relationship. I've been to Israel. I've been very clear on my position that I support Israel and support its right to defend itself. I was at the same acknowledgement that the former governor was. Senator Cardin, who has supported me, said he's ashamed of former Governor Hogan and how he has politicized this issue and tried to use it as a way to divide us. And when we speak of allies, if the Republicans are in the Senate, they have shown that they do not respect our alliances, including NATO. We'll back out of it and we'll leave Ukraine to fight for itself. I support our alliances and will continue to support both Israel and Ukraine.
Well, this is setting up. We're going to do a couple of foreign policy questions here. Let me start with a fresh one here for you, Mr. Hogan. When it comes to tensions between Taiwan and China, should the United States guarantee the security of Taiwan, even if it means putting American boots on the ground or essentially in the Pacific?
Well, look, I think it's very strong, very important for us to stand up for our allies and stand up to our enemies. I believe in peace through strength. Right now, we've got fires around the world. The whole world is basically a tinderbox, and we're dealing with Ukraine and Taiwan and China and Iran threatening in the Middle East. The reason I got into this race, the final straw for me, was when I watched Republicans and Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell tank the bipartisan deal that was going to secure the border, provide funding for Taiwan, for Ukraine, and most importantly for Israel. And they were for all of those things, but then they were told to change their vote. And I decided that night I was going to go down to Washington and try to do something about it. So I just think it's really important in times like this for us to have people that are focused. We have allies around the world who wonder if they can still count on us or still trust us, and we have enemies that wonder if they should still fear us.
Before I get Ms. Alsobrooks 1 minute, you didn't answer directly. Is Taiwan's security so important that if China wants to take it over, it's worth American troops to help fight side by side with Taiwan against China?
Well, hopefully it won't get to that point, Chuck. We've got other more pressing things right now, but China threatening Taiwan is something that we should definitely be concerned about. Whether or not we put boots on the ground.
Intentionally ambiguous?
I hope it doesn't get to that point.
Okay, Ms. Alsobrooks, you have a minute on this question on Taiwan?
Yeah, I do not agree that we put boots on the ground. We do not put U.S. men and women on the ground for this conflict. The problem that the former governor is going to have is his party does not believe in these alliances. They have wanted to back out of NATO. We know as well that they have refused to really give Ukraine the help that they need. It was the Democratic Party that's led that. I believe in our alliances, and what I believe with respect to China is if we do not stand up to Vladimir Putin, who is a dangerous dictator who invaded Ukraine, that China will invade Taiwan. The smartest thing we do is to really shore up our alliances through NATO and our multilateral relationships to act as a deterrent to China, who is watching. And they will see what the United States does with respect to Ukraine to decide whether to go into Taiwan. We know as well that Vladimir Putin's not done. If we don't stand up for Ukraine, he'll continue to go across Eastern Europe. Poland will be next. And so these relationships, our alliances across the country will be important. And the Republican Party does not agree with this. They would let Ukraine fail.
Let me start with Ukraine. Would you increase support for Ukraine, keep it as is, or is there a point where you decrease support?
Well, I believe in support for Ukraine. The amount of it, but I agree with funding Ukraine, who have not asked us, by the way. They're a democracy. They have never come to the United States to say put men and women on the ground. They just want the tools to defend themselves, and we ought to continue to make sure that as an ally of the United States, that we support them in defeating Vladimir Putin, because again, he is not done yet, and he sends a horrible signal across the world. The Republicans have not supported Ukraine and will let them fail.
Mr. Hogan, I know you're supportive of Ukraine. Would you go as far as supporting Ukraine's membership to NATO?
Well, first of all, here we go again with the Republican-Democrat thing. Look, I criticized Democrats and Republicans who wouldn't support Israel and Ukraine and to stand up for our allies. So, you know, there are plenty of people that are isolationists in both parties, and neither one of them, you know, has a lock on what we should do to keep America safe and keep us as the leader of the free world. But on Ukraine, I was one of the first. We sent aid before the United States did. We sent it from the state of Maryland. I've said from the beginning that we needed to be stronger in support of those allies, and we've got to bring an end to this conflict, and we'll be putting boots on the ground if we don't stop Putin now, because we'll have to defend a NATO country, and hopefully we won't get
just very quickly, would you support NATO, Ukraine into NATO, or not yet?
I would support Ukraine going into NATO.
Would you support NATO going into?
I think, you know, it's a complicated question as to whether or not we should. I think it should be explored.
All right, Jeff has the next question.
This goes to Ms. Alsobrooks first. There are a number of influential Democrats who are talking about expanding the Supreme Court from 9 justices to 13. And the idea is that if a Democratic president could appoint 4 new justices, there would be a majority of Democratic appointees on the court. Is that something you would support?
First of all, I'm very concerned about this Supreme Court. I think they no longer represent the will of the people. I think there are a couple of things that happen. I do support reforms for the Supreme Court. One of them would be to have term limits. I also agree with the notion of expanding the Supreme Court. I think we're going to have to do something to reform the Supreme Court. Again, looking at the decisions they have made, everything from overturning Roe, I think there are ethical problems with the Supreme Court. And again, this is another place where me and Mr. Hogan disagree, because the Supreme Court, I think, is awful. He went out and said that he thought that Donald Trump deserved credit for his appointments to the Supreme Court, and called the Supreme Court justices who have been appointed incredible. I think that they are out of line with the will of the American people. And again, whoever controls the Senate also controls people like Lindsey Graham will control appointing further Supreme Court justices. When we are at complete odds, the Supreme Court needs to be reformed.
Quick follow-up. I didn't hear a yes or no on what used to be called packing the court.
I agree with either increasing the number of justices or term limits, yes.
All right. And follow-up for Mr. Hogan, on the Trump nominees to the court in particular, how would you have voted? I think Justice Kavanaugh got through with no votes to spare.
You do. You had 1 minute. He's just adding an additional thing, and we'll give you your full 1 minute. Go ahead, Jeff. Finish your question.
That was the question.
Yeah, look, I think if there's one thing that we should not be politicizing, it's the Supreme Court. And yet it has been politicized by both sides. And I think trying to change the rules to jam things through on a party line vote is not the right way to go about it. I probably have more experience in this than most people in the Senate. I appointed 190 judges while I was governor, including 6 out of the 7 members of our Supreme Court. And every single one of them, three Republicans, 3 Democrats, 3 women, 2 African-American women, most diverse, most inclusive appointments in history. Every single one of our Supreme Court justices was unanimously confirmed by Republicans and Democrats. In Washington, they can't even get 1 vote. And both sides are trying to change the rules so they can pack the court. This is one area where we just have to make, what I did was find the most qualified judges, regardless of what party they were. And that's why we found, if you can't find one person to cross over and vote for a Democratic judge or a Republican judge, I'm not going to support them.
Just quickly following on Justice Kavanaugh, he passed with 1 vote. What would your vote have been?
Well, I stood up and I called out Mitch McConnell on Justice Kavanaugh when they were trying to not have a hearing. I said it should have a full and open hearing, and I called them out when they were trying to jam through the Barrett nomination right before the election, which I thought was wrong.
But how would you have voted on those confirmations?
I wasn't there, and I don't know how I would vote.
Okay, Ms. Alsobrooks, you have 30 seconds.
Oh, I think he said how he would vote. He said he thought they were incredible. He thought they were great Supreme Court justice nominations. These are his words, not mine. He said that Donald Trump, quote, deserves credit for his accomplishments in office, including the incredible Supreme Court justices that he nominated. I disagree. I would not have supported those Supreme Court justices who overturned Roe, by the way, who also overturned the bump stock decision, who decided the immunity decision, who decided the Chevron decision that will hurt our climate. I think that they were awful Supreme Court justices, and I would not have voted to confirm them.
All right, Tracy has the next question.
Mr. Hogan, your opponent and her party say that you can't be trusted on abortion since you vetoed legislation that would have trained more abortion providers. And you've said personally you are opposed to abortion, but now you say you support Roe. Please detail what abortion access you are prepared to champion in the Senate.
Well, look, my opponent has been, her whole entire campaign is based on lies. I said this earlier. I have been against. The first day I got in the race, she said I was going to be the deciding vote for an abortion ban, which I've been against since 1992. When I ran for governor, I promised to provide access to abortion that would do nothing to change law. That's exactly what I delivered on for 8 years. Everybody in Maryland knows that. When 5 or 6 years ago, I said Roe was the correct decision. When it was overturned, I said it was the wrong decision. And I said, when I get to the Senate, the very first vote, my first bill I will sponsor is to codify Roe. So, no, I don't understand. It's completely false. And back to the thing about the incredible justices. I was at a Jewish coalition event where I was very critical of Donald Trump. I said there are some things I agree with him on. And then there was a decision that just came out just before that event that was about not discriminating against Jewish students when it came to scholarships to go to private schools. And I thought that was an incredible decision. But I've called them out on all the bad decisions.
You have 1 minute, Ms. Alsobrooks.
Well, let me just say, I believe the former governor when he says that he disagrees with Donald Trump, the person, but he does agree with some of his policies. And I think that this issue is one that is very personal to me. As a mother of a 19-year-old daughter, she's facing a world where she has fewer rights than her mother and grandmother. And so this is very important. The fact of the matter is, when the former governor had an opportunity to stand up for the women of Maryland, he didn't. He vetoed abortion care legislation. He doubled down and refused to release the funding to train abortion care providers. This was just 2 years ago. And when the Supreme Court overturned Roe, he then went out and complimented them. The problem he's going to have is his party does not agree with him. The Republican Party has declared war on the reproductive freedoms of women, contraception, IVF, Mitch McConnell, Ted Cruz. We're thinking about Rick Scott. These are all people who say they would like an abortion ban. And no matter what's in his heart, I believe him when he says that he's had a change of heart. The fact of the matter is there will be no vote on Roe if he gives a majority to the Republicans in the Senate.
Mr. Hogan, you get 30 seconds.
First of all, she keeps misrepresenting the bill that was passed. It was to change the law so that instead of just doctors and physicians' assistants and nurses, we would let non-licensed professionals like midwives perform abortions. Now, you can disagree with that, my position, but you can't lie about it and say I was denying access. The funding was to do that bill, which I didn't agree with because I thought it would roll back the clock on protecting women, and I thought it was unsafe, and a lot of people in the medical community agreed with me.
Tracy also has the next question.
So, Ms. Alsobrooks, I have a separate question for you on abortion. As Prince George's County executive, you have often testified in writing or in person for state legislation that you support in Annapolis. For the last 2 years in Maryland, there have been bills to protest women's reproductive or to protect women's reproductive rights, access to safe abortions, and also privacy. And some county executives have testified in favor of those bills, but you have not. Why?
I don't know specifically which bill you are referencing, but I have been a very vocal supporter of a woman's right to choose. I think that's, irrefuted. I have supported, I have supported and still support women's access to reproductive care. It's not just abortion care. It's also things like Planned Parenthood, and that's the reason that they have endorsed me. I've received the endorsement of Reproductive Freedom for All because of my strong record on this issue. I've received the support of Emily's List as well as Planned Parenthood, who are aware of my strong and uncontroverted record on this issue, and I'll continue to support women's reproductive freedoms, contraception, abortion, and IVF.
Mr. Hogan, you have 1 minute.
Look, we're never going to get anything done in Washington if you're just going to attack people when they agree with you. We agree on this issue, and I fully funded Planned Parenthood and abortion every single year while I was governor. And look, this is a very important issue, and to misrepresent what the facts are is really, it's sad. And it's unfortunate, but I've been very clear. My record is clear, and you and I pretty much agree on this issue. And yet you continue to say that I have a different position than I have. And my record as governor is clear.
Go ahead, you have a 30 seconds.
I'll just say it again. The point is that I believe the former governor when he says that he's changed and has a different...
I didn't say that.
Well, the point of the matter is, if the Republicans are in control of the Senate, there will be no vote on Roe. We've seen this movie all before. When Mitch McConnell refused to bring it to a vote, they have been abundantly clear that they do not desire to codify Roe, and that they would be seeking a national abortion. And if Mitch McConnell or Ted Cruz or Lindsey Graham are there, it won't happen.
I'm going to follow up on this with both of you, and I'll start with you, Ms. Alsobrooks. I believe Vice President Harris has come out in favor of getting rid of the filibuster in order to codify Roe. Would you be in favor of that?
I would. I would. We've seen the filibuster be used as a tool to thwart civil rights legislation. We've seen the filibuster has been used in ways that have been very destructive, and that really has not been in the interest of the people. This issue is one that is very near and dear, not only to Marylanders, but to people all across our country who do not want, like my daughter who is in Georgia, to have to look out in the country and decide where to live based on where she will have freedoms. I'll be working to codify the Women's Health Protection Act. I'll be voting for it to be the first piece of legislation I would co-sponsor.
We're a very polarized climate. You really think 60 votes is what we should wait for in order to codify Roe?
Look, I think it's a terrible idea. And you know who agrees with my opponent is Donald Trump. There's been a lot of talking about Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell, but she and Donald Trump agree that we should change the rules, longstanding rules that required bipartisan cooperation, and change the rules so you can jam things through on a party line partisan vote. And you got to be careful what you wish for, because you don't know who's going to be jamming things through. I like the idea of continuing to have to find people across the aisle, find that bipartisan compromise. I'll work with Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski on my side to try to get that done.
So you think 60 votes should be the bar?
I think making Washington more partisan and allowing more things to be jammed through by one vote, which she's been complaining about in most of the evening. Now she says she wants to do it for this one thing, but then when the pendulum swings back every 2 years or 4 years, everybody's going to jam through with other things.
Is there anything about lowering the threshold that does concern you from 60 votes to 50 votes?
Well, let me just say this. I talked to Senator Cardin about this issue. And he said, unfortunately, in his experience now, whoever's in the majority controls the agenda, and that he believes the filibuster has been used in such a way that we no longer have the deliberative body that we need in the Senate, and agrees, and many who have been there agree, that we have reached a point where it's become destructive, and we're going to have to really to reform and to abolish this filibuster in order to get back to the deliberative body that it should be. And so I agree that we're going to have to do something. We've seen the progress has been thwarted.
All right. Deborah has the next question.
I'd like to talk to you about gun violence. It was a month ago when Maryland witnessed a fatal school shooting in Harford County. The same week, there was a school shooting in Georgia that killed 2 teachers and 2 students. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children in the United States. Do you believe the federal government has a role in reducing gun violence, especially when it comes to schools and the nation's young people?
Go ahead. Mr. Hogan, you have.
Well, absolutely there is a role. And I've been a long supporter of common sense gun legislation. I'm for a universal background check. I have always done everything possible to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill and out of the hands of criminals. I will support a bipartisan common sense assault weapons ban. As governor, I signed a red flag law to keep guns out of the hands of the mentally ill. I signed a bump stock bill. And when there was a school shooting in Maryland, in Great Mills in St. Mary's County, I passed the Safe to Learn Act, which required school resource officers in every single high school in Maryland to try to keep people safe. And I've committed to sponsoring that exact same bill at the federal level. Unfortunately, my opponent pulled the school safety out of the schools, and the bill is no longer requiring it.
Governor, what is a common sense assault weapons ban?
I think I would support an assault weapons ban. We've got to get, again, bipartisan agreement on getting a bill passed.
Ms. Alsobrooks, you have a full minute to respond on this.
Thank you. First of all, let me just correct misinformation he just gave. I have not pulled any school resource officers out of the schools. In fact, the Washington Post just complimented me in their endorsement of me, saying that I fought against the effort to remove those SROs. It's also the case that the former governor just complimented me just 2 years ago on my leadership on this issue of public safety, saying that I was a leader across the state. The fact that the #1 killer of our children is gun violence, and that we as a country have done nothing about it is shameful. And there's an opportunity. I would be in favor of eliminating assault weapons, also removing ghost guns from our streets. And the reality is, unfortunately, the former governor did not have the courage. As a governor, he, in fact, vetoed legislation that would have created a waiting period for long guns and outright refused to sign the ban on ghost guns. He could have helped us on this issue, but he instead kowtowed to the gun lobby and vetoed a ban that would have just created that waiting period for long guns and did not support us.
Yeah,
Mr. Hogan,
again, this
30
is all kind of half-truths and, trying to confuse people. On ghost guns, it did become law while I was governor, and I just didn't have a bill signing ceremony with the legislature because I had legislation that was trying to actually do something about the people shooting people with guns. It was tougher mandatory sentences for repeat violent offenders and people who commit a felony with a gun. We already have the toughest gun legislation in America, and yet it's not stopping a 100% increase in murders in places like Prince George's County. So we've got to take the shooters off the street. The long gun bill was a hunting rifle with people. No one in Baltimore City had ever been Prince George. They weren't shooting people with hunting rifles that were registered. It was illegal handguns and ghost guns, which I was very supportive of.
I have a quick follow-up on sort of guns and policing for both of you. The George Floyd Justice and Policing Act would restrict chokeholds and no-knock warrants. If elected, Mr. Hogan, would you help pass the George Floyd Policing Act?
Well, I'd have to take a look at exactly what the act says. I can tell you one thing that I'm very concerned about, and I probably spoke out about this more than anyone in America. When the defund the police movement started, I was the loudest critic against it. It was saying you're going to improve public safety by defunding the police was like saying you're going to improve education by defunding the schools. It was absurd and ridiculous. So I passed the first bill in America, a refund the police initiative, with a 50% increase in state aid to local police so they could hire more officers, so they could train better, so they could teach de-escalation techniques. My opponent has cut the Prince George's County Police. They're down 300 officers and doing 12-hour shifts, and crime is out of control. 500% increase in carjackings.
Ms. Alsobrooks, on the George Floyd Policing Act, would you support it?
I would. And let me just also correct something he just said. The fact of the matter is, I not only supported law enforcement, I was law enforcement. The chief law enforcement officer in Prince George's County oversaw a 50% lowering of crime when I was the chief law. I've increased police funding by 23%. And when he talked about the ghost guns, he said that he would it did pass, but it's like so much of his record. Because we had such a strong Democratic legislature, thank God for them, they had to block so much of what he wanted to veto. And again, he's not going to Annapolis, he's going to Washington, and will not have the same supports we had in Annapolis. We couldn't have got anything done if we didn't have that Democratic legislature.
All right, I want to turn to the issue of immigration. And I'm going to start straightforward to you, Ms. Alsobrooks. I'll start with you. Should Prince George's County remain a sanctuary city?
Prince George's County is not a sanctuary city.
How would you describe it?
Yeah. So as county executive, I actually created a policy that said that violent offenders, we cooperated with the federal government to make sure that we notified them when we release violent offenders. I am also the person, when we think about this issue, who stood in courtrooms and prosecuted gang members who were in MS-13. So I've been very consistent where this issue has been concerned. I have cooperated with the federal government. I know that the former governor lied about my record on this, but that's what the record is.
How would you describe it? Is this something that the council did? That they didn't want local law enforcement cooperating on everything?
They did not. I changed the policy to ensure that when we released people who were accused of gang activity or violence, that we notified the federal government.
Okay, you have 1 minute, Mr.
Yeah, well, first of all, with respect to the crime in general, I have the endorsement of a unanimous endorsement of the Maryland FOP and nearly every single law enforcement organization in the state because they don't think you did such a good job on crime. And Prince George's County police officers are the ones that are really complaining about how things have gotten out of control. But look, on the ICE detainers, it's not true. You are the largest jurisdiction in Maryland that refuses to work with federal law enforcement, and you will not notify them. When ICE requests a detainer for a violent rapist or murderer or gang member, you do not cooperate. I mean, that's just a fact. And even Wes Moore said your policy is breaking federal law.
You have 30 seconds.
Well, actually, again, it's not true. What he said about not cooperating with the federal government is just a lie. It is. I changed the policy. And furthermore, I am the only person on this stage who stood flat-footed in a courtroom, and I prosecuted and convicted murderers, rapists, and gang members. And I did so with the police department. I did so with law enforcement. In fact, I was law enforcement. And together, the partnership that we created helped us to be effective. And they're doing a tremendous job right now in Prince George's County, where we're seeing lowering crime in every category except one where we are up 1 point.
All right, I want to get you both to 1 minute to answer this simple question. Would you vote to legalize marijuana on a federal level? Mr. Hogan, you go first.
I was hesitant to. I was for medical marijuana, but I never really considered legalizing recreational marijuana on a national basis. I think many states have already done it, including Maryland, but we haven't seen the full impact of that yet. And I think some of law enforcement are concerned about the fact that we had a lot of deaths for drug driving, and I think we've got to make some more advances before we take a step like that.
So you're not ready to legalize on a federal level?
No.
At all. Ms. Alsobrooks,
Well, the people of Maryland have spoken on this issue, and they legalized it here, and I would vote to also do so on the federal level.
You had some hesitation about this at first.
Well, the hesitation I have is that I think it's an awful idea to have children. I've always been very clear on this issue, is that I'm deeply concerned about the impacts of marijuana on children. And so I've always said whatever adults do, recreationally or otherwise, is for an adult to make a decision. But I think we ought to be protective of our children in the same way that we have been with alcohol and other things. We've watched our children suffer, and I think that we should be really cautious and be concerned about our children having access to marijuana and other substances.
All right, this next question, also 1 minute for both of you. Ms. Alsobrooks, you'll get it first. Should the federal government workers still be allowed to work from home 1 or 2 days a week, or is it time that they return to the office 5 days a week?
I support having our federal workers be able to work from home once or twice a week. By the way, I'm the granddaughter of a federal worker who worked very hard to get herself in the federal government. She was a housekeeper, taught herself to type on her refrigerator so that she could get that federal job. Our federal workers do a tremendous job. I'll be supportive of them, of their wages and of their benefits. We know that if the Republicans gain control, they have put forward Project 2025, which anticipates that they would eviscerate the federal workforce, would politicize it, would harm our federal workers, including the 7% of all 130,000 federal workers live in the state of Maryland. But I'll be standing up for our federal workers, which is why I have the endorsement of the of AFGE, the Federal Government Employees Union, and I'll continue to make sure that we are defending and protecting their rights.
Mr. Hogan, same question.
Yes, with respect to Project 2025, I'm the leading voice in the Republican Party against that, and wrote an opinion in the Washington Post, and I think was not single-handedly, but certainly a big part of the reason why the Republicans have backed down on that, and I called out all of the crazy things that they were trying to do. That's the beauty of having someone in the party being willing to stand up to their leaders. I'm not sure when you've ever stood up to party leaders, but I've done it when it was hard, and I've done it over and over again, and I will continue to. But I agree, we have the largest concentration of federal employees, and for them to try to politicize the federal government was just absurd and ridiculous, which is why I was so strong in voicing my opposition. With respect to getting workers back to work, certainly there are some things that could be done remotely, but it's been a disaster for the Washington metropolitan area when we have empty buildings everywhere, restaurants closing because really very few people are getting back to work. When I was governor, I required people to get back to work because you can't do public service and interacting with folks in a lot of jobs if you're not there. Other things you can do from home.
Ms. Alsobrooks, should Washington, D.C.'s downtown economy be a factor in deciding whether federal workers should come in 5 days a week?
Again, I support federal workers. I support them staying, being able to stay home. Let me just also say this. You know, it's interesting to me to hear the former governor consistently say he criticizes the Republican Party, the same one that he had the option to run as something else, and he gladly put on their jersey. When Mitch McConnell called him, he put the jersey on, he ran into the game, says he disagrees with, you know, all of these various aspects of it. And the reality is, again, his mere election would empower the people whose policies he says he disagrees with so strongly, and it wouldn't be anything he can do about them calling votes and doing other things, blocking President Kamala Harris if they had the majority. All right.
Next question, I'll start with you, Mr. Hogan. On the issue of transportation, as governor, you blocked some transportation projects in Baltimore, Baltimore's Red Line. There's been the Purple Line in the D.C. metro area. How would you handle federal funding of Maryland's transportation projects as senator? Would you be a champion of getting more federal funding for, say, a Purple Line or
Well, so I'm very proud of my record on infrastructure. When I ran for governor, we had crumbling roads and bridges, and no money had been invested. It's one of the reasons I got elected, because I promised to do something about that. And we moved forward on nearly every single transportation project all across the state, resurfaced almost 90% of the entire state highway system. No governor has ever invested more in transit or in roads than I did while I was governor. And then when I was chairman of the National Governors Association, I led a chair's initiative on rebuilding America's infrastructure. I got all 50 governors to agree to it. And then all of it became part of the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which I strongly supported. I even hosted a summit in Annapolis where I brought Republican and Democratic governors, senators, and congressmen together to get it done. And when it was stalled, I pushed Republicans and Democrats to get the bipartisan infrastructure bill done. Republicans only wanted to do roads and bridges. Democrats wanted to add $4 trillion of social spending, and we reached an agreement and helped get that deal done, which I think was good for America.
Ms. Alsobrooks.
The former governor did something that was so shameful. We know that the #1 issue across our state is economic opportunity. And having the opportunity to invest in a red line that would have created, not only attracted jobs and opportunities to Baltimore, but would have allowed people to have access to those opportunities. And he did something that no governor in history has ever done in Maryland, returned $900 million to the federal government to ask them to redistribute it essentially to other states. This not only crushed that opportunity, but it was unprecedented. And furthermore, what we know is that he would not invest, not only, I think we need someone who can see the whole state. I worked conversely to draw the FBI headquarters to Maryland, bringing the 7,500 jobs here, cybersecurity and technology. I drew $100 million near the New Carrollton Metro Station. And I even worked with the former governor for the first time to attract $400 million to the Blue Line Corridor, creating jobs and opportunities. That's what I will do as a senator, not send money back to the federal government. I'll be fighting for every part of our state to attract every single dollar we can to the state of Maryland.
Well, I ran for governor promising not to do the red line and promising to build every other project all across the state. The Washington Post editorial board said it never made any transportation or economic sense. Most people in Baltimore didn't support it, and almost no one across the rest of the state did. What we have, it was a $7 billion project. It wasn't going to accomplish much of anything, and we had $900 million. Nobody in our transportation department wanted to move forward on it. But what we need to move forward on now is fixing the Key Bridge and doing the Howard Street Tunnel. And these are kinds of things. Fixing the traffic relief plan that was just killed because the Transportation Trust Fund has been drained and there's no money to build any projects.
We have technically come to the end of our questions. I have one final one for you, Mr. Hogan. I know you said you wrote in Ronald Reagan's name, that you've already voted. If you'd lived in a state that was up for grabs, you said your vote doesn't matter in your state. Is that how you still would have voted?
Well, look, I've never voted for someone I didn't believe in, and I was the chairman of No Labels with Joe Lieberman, and we're all about trying to find. I think there are an awful lot of people in America that don't feel that these two folks that are at the top of both tickets are the best people to lead America, and that's why we have the ability to kind of write in and take whatever decision you make. I'm not going to make that decision for other people. I don't plan on moving out of Maryland, and so I'm not going to speculate on what I might do if I was somewhere else.
Go ahead, 30 seconds.
I think the decision not to vote in a presidential election for a senator is a disqualifier. This job requires votes, tough votes, that you have to make a decision. And for a person who says he could see a bipartisan way forward, but was unable to do the most bipartisan thing ever in an election where he says he despises their nominee, but cannot bring himself to even vote for Vice President Harris, and in fact will have forfeited the chance to vote in 3 different elections, rather than stand up, do the right thing, choose a tough vote and vote for a Democrat. He voted for deceased individuals and said he will do so again in this election. And I think it is instructive of the way that he would operate as a senator, unable to make tough calls and to go to do what he declares is bipartisan. This is the most bipartisan thing you can do.
Well, here's the toughest call I'm going to make you both make. Ravens or Commanders?
Commanders.
Ravens.
We guessed right. And now for closing statements, Ms. Alsobrooks.
Well, I want to thank
Alsobrooks, you have the first closing
thank you so much again to all the hosts for having us tonight. Thank you, former Governor Hogan, also for being here, for everyone for watching. It has been a great joy for me to have represented our state for the last 27 years. I've done so proudly to fight for our families on every front, fighting to keep our communities safe, fighting to grow economic opportunity, fighting to ensure that we are caring for every part of our community, providing health care access. I've built mental health facilities, built a cancer center, broken ground on 18 schools and built 10. I'll continue as a senator standing up for our values, fighting every single day to preserve not only our freedoms, but economic opportunity for every member of our family in Maryland. I'll do that making sure that we are moving forward, and I'll support President Kamala Harris, making sure that she has the majority that she needs in the Senate so that she can get her agenda across and that she can take our country forward, that we can together, the values that we share, honor them. Human rights, democracy, freedom, integrity, decency, these are what we believe in. It's what I will fight for every day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And Mr. Hogan, your closing statement.
Well, thank you again. Thank you all for watching tonight. Look, as I said at the beginning, we're going to hear a lot about Democrat versus Republican, red versus blue. All I really care about is the red, white, and blue. And I think that sending more partisan politicians, making Washington more partisan and more divided is not going to help. The country is way off track. I mean, I'm completely fed up with politics as usual. And if you want to change things in Washington, you're not going to do it by doing the exact same thing you always do. I have a proven track record of standing up and bringing people together, having the courage to stand up to the former president, to the current president, and I'll do it to the future president and to the Republicans or Democrats. I'm trying to put people over politics and country over party, and I'm asking the voters of Maryland to be willing to do the same thing, and I'm asking for their vote.
Thank you both. Thank you very much. That concludes tonight's debate. We'd really like to thank the two candidates for participating. Also would like to thank Maryland Public Television in this terrific studio for hosting us here. And thanks to our panelists, Tracy Wilkins, Deborah Weiner, and Jeff Salkin. For all of my colleagues here at NBC News, NBC Washington, WBAL, I'm Chuck Todd. Good night.